Hey guys, tonight we're crashing a medieval wedding. Picture this. A pale morning sun barely breaks through the mist, roosters are losing their minds, and you're standing ankle-deep in mud at the edge of a noisy village that smells like baked rye, wood smoke, and just a hint of wet dog. There's a commotion near the central square. Someone's stringing up old cloth to hide the worst of the pig pen, while kids chase a chicken that may or may not be the ring bearer. You rub your eyes, adjust your cloak, and try to remember why you thought this was a good idea. Spoiler: you probably won't survive this without catching lice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when people are listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just in time for the not-so-grand beginning. The villagers are still hauling logs into place for benches. There's a cart tilted awkwardly into a ditch. Its contents, mostly barley, maybe a cat, now becoming part of the landscape. You pass a bent old man who tells you, with great pride, that he's attended 4 weddings in this village and lived to tell about all of them. That may not sound impressive until you realize the average life expectancy around here hovers somewhere between bad cold and stepped on by ox. You make your way toward the center of the action. There's no wedding arch, no white chairs, no flower petals on the ground, unless you count the accidental ones trodden underfoot by a goat named Ethel. But there's something undeniably charming about it. People are gathering with excitement. Someone's playing a hurdy-gurdy with just enough skill to motto. You wince only slightly. A child hands you a wilted daisy as a token of welcome. You're officially part of the wedding crowd now. Historians still argue whether commoners of the time truly made a big deal of weddings, or whether many simply paired off and called it done. But today's couple, Greta and Tomas, are having a proper village affair. Not because they're nobles, mind you, but because Greta's uncle is the Reeve, and he insisted on something festive after a hard winter of spoiled grain and suspicious goat deaths. You follow a group of neighbors as they crowd near a rough wooden platform where someone's already spilled half a jug of cider. A few people are dressed up in their finest, meaning fewer patches and slightly cleaner wool. The groom hasn't arrived yet, but that doesn't stop his friends from yelling rude jokes in his general absence. One jokes that if Tomas shows up sober, it'll be the first miracle since St. Cuthbert's left toe started weeping oil. Nearby, the local priest is muttering to himself as he sorts through a bundle of parchment. He's clearly stressed, possibly because he's also officiating 2 funerals and a sheep blessing later today. You spot a tiny book peeking out from his robes, probably a Latin missal, or maybe his gambling ledger. Then comes the unmistakable clatter of hooves. Everyone turns. A donkey ambles into view, led by a boy no older than 8, and seated on it, quite ungracefully, is Tomas, the groom. He's wearing a tunic that was once blue but now leans more toward mossy puddle. He grins sheepishly. One of his front teeth is missing, lost in a celebratory fistfight 2 nights ago during his semi-accidental bachelor party. The crowd cheers. Tomas slides off the donkey with a grunt and is immediately patted down by various relatives to make sure he hasn't forgotten anything important, like pants. He hasn't, though they, held together by what appears to be a piece of fishing twine. Fashion, as always, is subjective. Now, a fun little fringe tidbit. In some rural areas, there was a custom of throwing old shoes at the groom to symbolize luck, or perhaps just to hit him with something. Today, you dodge a flying slipper and realize you're standing too close to the action. You retreat to a safer zone near the village oven, which conveniently offers warmth and the distant smell of burnt onions. There's a loud gasp, followed by hushed murmurs. The bride has arrived. Greta appears through the morning haze, flanked by 2 aunts and one particularly round cousin who seems to be crying already. She's wearing a linen gown dyed with woad, a deep, watery blue that stains her fingertips with every nervous fidget. Her hair is braided tightly, and a delicate garland of rosemary sits on her head. Rosemary, because it symbolizes remembrance, and also because roses are expensive and someone's pig ate the violets. A gaggle of children runs ahead of her, tossing bits of straw and dried herbs on the ground as makeshift confetti. You think one of them is trying to juggle apples. It ends poorly. Greta's eyes dart toward Tomas. She smiles shyly. He blushes so hard his ears go pink, which causes someone's grandmother to cackle and slap her knee. As the bride and groom finally stand side by side, there's a brief silence. Even the goat stops chewing. This, you realize, is the calm before the feast, the stillness before the vows, the bread breaking, and whatever this place considers dancing. You lean back on your heels, feeling the muddy earth beneath your soles and the low hum of excitement in the air. You're not sure what's coming next, but it's going to be messy, probably loud, and surprisingly sweet. You'd think that in a time when half the population couldn't read and the other half were too busy dodging plagues, love would be straightforward. But no, you're standing next to a cabbage cart watching. An argument unfold. Greta's uncle and Tomas's older brother are bickering over how many chickens should be included in the dowry. Not metaphorically, actual chickens. Clucking, flapping, mildly aggressive. This is what counts as high romance in the village. And believe it or not, it's perfectly normal. In the medieval world, marriages, especially among the lower classes, were less about swooning and more about survival. It was less, you complete me, and more, you have land, I have goats, shall we merge our assets? Your modern heart might be aching for passion, but here, passion is a bonus. Negotiated alliance is the real wedding bell. You edge closer, pretending to inspect the cabbages while eavesdropping. Greta's family insists they offered a perfectly respectable dowry, a small parcel of land, 2 hens, and a length of woolen cloth that may or may not have been stolen from a monastery. Tomas's side is unconvinced. They want at least 1 more chicken, or a jug of last year's mead, preferably both. Historians still argue whether peasant families formally documented these agreements or relied on handshakes, public declarations, or someone's memory after 3 ales. What's certain is that dowries were crucial. They weren't just symbolic, they were practical. They helped the new couple set up house, especially when houses often amounted to a single room shared with in-laws, livestock, and the occasional rat named for a saint. Greta, for her part, looks bored. She's leaning against a fence post, picking dirt from under her nails. This isn't her first time hearing her uncle haggle, and she knows it could take a while. Some women in her position would already be married, or widowed and remarried twice by now. But Greta's family held out for a match who had good prospects, which in Tomas's case means, well, a mostly intact roof and fewer lice than average. You're handed a cup of something warm by a passing cousin. It tastes vaguely of cloves and apples and something suspiciously herbal. It might be the village's version of mulled cider, or it might be fermented turnip. You sip cautiously and feel your cheeks warm. Just then, a woman in a lopsided bonnet sidles up beside you and whispers, "They met during sheep shearing, you know." Apparently, Greta and Tomas first locked eyes during a communal sheep shearing festival 3 summers ago. She nicked his blade. He chased her. She tackled him. It was the beginning of something tender, or at least bruised. And yet, despite the spark, marriage had to wait. Greta's parents wouldn't commit until Tomas's aunt, who technically owned the cottage he lived in, died or agreed to share. The aunt, stubborn and suspicious of all romance, clung to her chair and her pickled onions until finally being bribed with a jar of honey and a promise of weekly foot massages. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, especially among peasants, informal unions were common before formal weddings. A couple might cohabit, sometimes even have children, before officially tying the knot. The church hated this, of course, and tried desperately to enforce stricter norms. But villagers often went with the rhythm of practicality, not papal guidelines. That said, some places really leaned into the business aspect. In parts of Germany and France, formal marriage markets were held, essentially medieval dating fairs where fathers displayed daughters and eligible sons strutted like slightly bashful roosters. You imagine Tomas at such a fair, nervously fiddling with a turnip while Greta pretends not to notice. Back in our muddy little village, negotiations are wrapping up. The chicken count has been accepted. A formal nod is exchanged. Greta's uncle even claps Tomas on the back so hard he stumbles into a bétier, barrel of carrots. Approval has been granted. The match is sealed, not yet by God, but certainly by cabbage and community. A curious custom now unfolds. A neighbor approaches carrying a wooden spoon tied with a ribbon. She hands it to Greta with a wink. It's symbolic, meant to wish her success in stirring the couple's future meals, though you suspect it also doubles as a mild threat. Feed your husband well, or the village will know. You move with the group as they drift toward the central green, where 2 benches and a suspiciously wobbly table await the coming feast. Along the way, you catch snippets of conversation. One woman reminisces about her own wedding. It was foggy, and my groom showed up wearing his brother's boots. Another boasts that she had 3 pigs in her dowry, and one of them only bit people sometimes. Suddenly, a group of boys sprints past, laughing and tossing straw in the air. You recognize one of them as Greta's cousin, who is notorious for setting fire to a haystack last harvest. He's tied streamers to a sheep and declared it the love lamb. It seems today's chaos is only just beginning. As you settle onto a tree stump near the makeshift seating, you overhear 2 older men debating whether this match will hold. One says Tomas is too soft. The other counters that Greta could run the manor if she wanted to. She's got that look, he says, the one that says she'll outlive us all. You glance at her across the square. She's laughing now, eyes crinkled, shoulders relaxed for the first time all morning. Maybe, just maybe, this strange, barter-based, cabbage-accented love story has a shot. The wedding's not official yet, but the sparks of courtship have already lit half the village on fire, metaphorically speaking. As you wander past a pile of slightly damp firewood and a boy arguing with a goose, your mind drifts to how these 2 lovebirds act. Chilly got here. After all, this isn't exactly the age of dinner dates and long walks on the beach. In medieval times, courtship wasn't private, not even a little. You didn't woo someone behind closed doors. You did it in full view of your extended family, your neighbors, and at least 3 nosy milkmaids. If you were lucky, they only mildly disapproved. So how did Greta and Tomas court one another without causing scandal? With difficulty. You overhear a woman describe how Tomas used to accidentally pass by Greta's cottage on his way to nowhere in particular, always when she was drawing water or hanging laundry. He'd comment on the weather, or the goats, or the precise alignment of the moon, anything really. Greta, playing her part, would answer just coolly enough to be polite, but warm enough to keep him coming back, and then she'd go inside and roll her eyes until her cheeks ached. In theory, courtship was supposed to be supervised, especially if you were from a family with even a shred of land or reputation. This meant chaperones, mothers, grandmothers, or that one terrifying aunt who once chased a traveling bard out of town with a broom. You picture Tomas sweating bullets under the glare of Greta's chaperone, pretending to admire a cooking pot, while quietly praying not to say anything stupid about cabbage yields. But humans will be humans. And love, bless its clumsy heart, finds a way. In villages like this, messages were sometimes passed using ribbons or herbs, little tokens tucked into baskets or left hanging on doors. One teenage girl proudly shows you a dried flower Greta once gave Tomas. It's been flattened in a prayer book for months. The flower's mostly dust now, but the sentiment lingers. And then there's the market. Ah yes, the beating social heart of the medieval village. On market days, young people could mix with plausible deniability. They'd linger near the cheese wheel or loiter by the eel cart, exchanging glances while pretending to be very interested in barley. You imagine Tomas rehearsing his lines before walking up to Greta. "Nice turnips," he might say. "Yours look exceptionally firm. Romance. Thy name is root vegetable." Historians still argue whether these informal flirtations were truly encouraged or just tolerated. The church, naturally, preferred a very rigid sequence of approval: betrothal with family consent, minimal contact, followed by a nice solemn wedding with no funny business. But out here, far from bishops and papal decrees, things were flexible. Quiet meetings at the well, shared jokes at the millstone, and yes, even the occasional moonlit conversation over a fence post. One curious fringe tidbit: in some communities, lovers exchanged love spoons, ornately carved wooden spoons decorated with symbols like hearts, knots, or cages. The spoon was both a love token and a subtle flex on your woodworking skills. No spoon, no swoon. Back in the village, you watch Greta pull Tomas aside under the pretense of checking on the donkey. They talk quietly, both pretending not to smile. She hands him something, perhaps a token, or maybe just a slice of bread. Either way, it's an exchange that matters only to them. But not everyone's thrilled. Greta's younger cousin rolls her eyes and mutters, "She could have married the cooper's son." You ask why that matters. "He's got 2 geese," she says. Well, there's no competing with geese. Of course, love stories weren't always so cute. If the families didn't approve, courtship could quickly turn into scandal, or worse. Elopements happened, especially when couples were forbidden to marry due to class, family feuds, or that ever-tricky issue of consanguinity. Spoiler, in small villages, almost everyone was technically related. You imagine Tomas and Greta fleeing across fields in the dead of night, clutching bread, a blanket, and that one extremely unhelpful sheep. Still, for all the awkward glances and half-stolen moments, courtship held power. It was a rare space for choice, even if wrapped in constraints. The idea that 2 people could feel affection, even passion, and act on it in a world built on alliances and survival, it was quietly radical. Now, someone set up a game of riddles near the village oven. The younger crowd gathers around to shout rhymes at one another, with the occasional walnut tossed in appreciation. Greta and Tomas join in, laughing. One boy shouts, "Why did the goose cross the fen?" The answer, of course, is something bawdy and entirely unrepeatable. As you sip the last of your mystery cider, you realize you're witnessing something rare. Not just a marriage being built, but a bond. A strange, stubborn thing forged in laughter, tradition, and turnips. It's easy to think of medieval people as stoic or grim, but here, under this patchy sky, they're silly, hopeful, and just as awkward as you. Greta catches your eye and winks. For just a moment, you feel like you belong in their story too. The bells don't ring here, not real ones anyway. The village church has no tower, no proper bell, and barely enough pews to seat the devout and the mildly curious. But as you follow the crowd toward the chapel, someone's clanging a skillet against a bucket, and that counts for something. This is where the church steps in, or limps in, depending on your view. In theory, marriage is a holy sacrament, meant to be blessed and overseen by God's earthly representatives. But in practice, things are messier than a barrel of eels. The priest, a thin man with the nervous energy of a squirrel and a suspiciously stained robe, is preparing the altar. He mutters Latin under his breath, occasionally glancing toward a page that might just be upside down. There's a strong scent of incense, or possibly old cheese, wafting through the chapel. You take a seat on a rickety bench next to a boy holding a duck. It's not his pet, it's a wedding gift. The duck looks as unamused as you are confused. Now here's where things get complicated. Medieval marriages didn't require an official priestly ceremony, not at first. That only became enforced later, after the church realized people were just marrying themselves in barns, under trees, or after one too many mugs of mead. Consent, that is, both parties verbally agreeing to be married, was technically enough to make it valid. Just you, your partner, a couple of witnesses, and maybe a goose for good luck. Historians still argue whether peasants fully understood the church's growing role in marriage, or simply played along to avoid social punishment. Some communities didn't even have a priest on hand year-round, so folks improvised. A popular phrase was, "I take you as my wedded wife, husband," spoken aloud in front of witnesses. Boom, married. No need for Latin or itchy robes. But over time, especially after the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, the church tightened its grip. Marriages needed to be public, announced ahead of time, and preferably done in front of a priest. That's where bans come in. 3 public announcements over 3 consecutive Sundays to make sure no one objects or claims the couple is secretly related, betrothed to someone else, or already married. Awkward. You glance up at the chapel rafters, wondering how many love triangles this village has hidden over the years. There's a visible crack in the wall that someone's tried to patch with sheep wool and mud. It's holding, but just barely. Kind of like the church's moral authority in a place where half the villagers believe in fairies and the other half are only here for the ale. The ceremony begins, sort of. The priest calls for silence. A chicken clucks in response. The groom, now wearing a borrowed cloak to hide a suspicious cider stain, steps forward and offers a slightly wobbly bow. The bride follows, her hands tucked neatly into her sleeves, eyes down but smiling. The priest begins the blessing. It's mostly in Latin, except for a few English phrases that sneak through like squirrels in a garden. By the power vested, in sickness and in health. Until death or disease by mutton stew do you part. You try to follow the Latin. You catch coram Deo, before God, and consortium carnis, the union of flesh. Yikes, he mumbles that one. Then comes the bit where he asks if anyone objects. You brace yourself, because this village feels like the sort of place where someone always has a half-baked reason to interrupt. But no one speaks, except the duck. It quacks twice, loudly. That counts as approval. A quirky custom follows. The priest ties a long strip of cloth around Greta and Tomas's joined hands, literally tying the knot. It's symbolic, yes, but also practical. No row, balm for backing out when your wrists are bound with Aunt Hilda's old apron. Then comes the exchange of vows, spoken aloud, clearly and publicly, so no one can later claim it didn't happen. Tomas's voice shakes slightly. Greta answers with quiet firmness. There's an odd sort of magic in the way they speak. Two peasants in a leaky chapel, making promises under the scrutiny of neighbors, ducks, and a surprisingly attentive child eating pickled onions. Rings? Maybe, if you're rich or lucky, but in this case, no one has spare silver lying around, and finger sizes haven't been standardized. Instead, Tomas places a simple braided cord around Greta's wrist, his grandmother's, supposedly, and infused with the scent of old parsley. Historians debate how common rings were in peasant ceremonies. Among the nobility, yes, gold, silver, maybe even gem-encrusted. But for villagers, symbolic items varied widely: garlands, coins, or even a lock of hair. The important part was public recognition, not flashy jewelry. As the ceremony wraps, the priest calls down a final blessing, fumbling slightly on the bride's name and accidentally blessing her and all her poultry. No one corrects him. The crowd cheers, someone throws dried peas, the duck escapes. Greta and Tomas are officially wed. There's no kiss, no dramatic music, just a quiet nod between them and a soft flutter of rosemary petals. You stand with the rest of the villagers, clapping your hands and blinking against the dust floating in the sunlight through the cracked windows. Outside, bells would be ringing if there were bells. Instead, there's the joyful sound of pots clanging, children shouting, and one elderly man yelling that it's time for the good bread. You're not sure what that means, but you're definitely intrigued. As the couple exits the chapel, arm in arm, you follow the stream of villagers back toward the green. You've survived the church's part of the marriage ritual, which means it's time for food, fire, and several questionable dances. And if you're lucky, no one will ask you to sing. Now comes a moment that's equal parts tradition, guesswork, and strong-smelling soap: the bath. You're swept along with the rest of the villagers as they disperse from the chapel. Some head to the green to prepare for the feast, others to the ale barrels already foaming with excitement. But a small, determined group, mostly women with sleeves rolled high, marches off toward Greta's cottage, carrying buckets, herbs, and a suspiciously large wooden tub. You, curious and not especially helpful, follow at a safe distance. As it turns out, the bride's bath is next on the checklist. Now, to be clear, bathing in medieval times wasn't as rare as pop culture loves to claim. People did bathe, though maybe not daily, and definitely not with hot running water and eucalyptus-scented candles. Bathhouses existed in towns, and in wealthier communities, bathing was even considered a social affair. But out here in the countryside, bath time was a seasonal luxury and a logistical challenge. Greta's family is determined she'll smell like something better than root cellar and sheep. You duck under a crooked lintel and watch as the cottage is transformed. A fire's already roaring in the hearth, and water is being boiled in great iron pots. A younger cousin is shredding rosemary and mint into a cloth pouch, muttering something about warding off the wedding jitters. Another aunt is polishing a brush with boar bristles and what looks like a prayer. Historians still argue whether brides and grooms really had ceremonial baths before weddings, or whether this was more of a local custom, but there's enough evidence to suggest that at least in some areas, a symbolic cleansing was part of the ritual, especially for women, especially when aunties got involved. Greta is helped out of her dress by two brisk, competent women. She stands in her shift, arms crossed, trying not to laugh as someone tries to wrangle the goat out of the doorway. Modesty is maintained with blankets and screen walls made from laundry lines and patched tunics. You politely turn your back, admiring the cottage's impressive collection of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Then the tub is filled. It's not fancy, just a deep wooden barrel lined with cloth. But it's steaming, and the scent of lavender and thyme fills the air. Greta steps in with the slow, careful grace of someone trying not to scream at the temperature. It's hot, but not scalding, probably. Someone starts humming a folk tune. Another joins in. It turns into a low, sweet chant, the kind passed down from grandmothers who believed words had weight and water listened. Meanwhile, across the village, Tomas is undergoing a different kind of cleansing. It's less graceful. You catch wind of the scene when a boy races past, shouting, "They've got him cornered in the smithy!" You arrive to find Tomas shirtless, muddy, and mildly panicked, standing in a barrel of cold water while two friends scrub him down with rags and laughter. One of them is wielding a brush more suited for horse hooves. Another is tossing handfuls of crushed sage into the bucket like confetti. Tomas yelps, "Is this necessary?" "Absolutely," someone shouts. "Can't have you stinking up the vows." Fringe tidbit. In certain traditions, the groom's bath was more of a roast than a ritual. Friends and brothers would use the moment to tease him, dunk him, and occasionally paint his face with ashes or flour for comedic effect. In some places, it was believed this chaotic cleansing helped chase off bad spirits or bad breath, depending on whom you ask. You stay just long enough to watch Tomas get splashed in the face with what may be pickle brine, then retreat before the goat from earlier makes another appearance. It has a habit of showing up uninvited. Back at Greta's cottage, the mood has softened. She's been dried off, wrapped in fresh linen, and her hair is being plaited with strands of ribbon. She smells faintly of mint, firewood, and something like honeycomb. Her skin glows in the firelight, not from fancy skincare, but from actually being warm and clean for the first time in 3 market days. She's offered a sip of spiced wine and a small slice of honey cake, symbolic, says her aunt, of sweet beginnings, and hopefully not too many wasps in the pantry. You glance at the windowsill, where a bouquet of rosemary, juniper, and some mysterious yellow flower has been placed. It's meant to ward off bad luck, or possibly rats, or both. Outside, bells made of rusted metal and wooden chimes clack in the breeze. The sun has fully emerged now, and the village buzzes with anticipation. Children run past with cloth banners. Someone's tuning a lute with questionable success. The duck has returned. You can feel it in the air. Things are accelerating. The food is almost ready. The dance space has been cleared. The ale is being guarded with the intensity of a sacred relic. And Greta? She takes a deep breath, looks into the cracked mirror on the cottage wall, and nods at herself. She doesn't look nervous. She looks like someone ready for the next chapter. Come feast. Come dance. Come whatever madness the villagers have planned. You step outside just as Tomas, still damp and suspiciously flour-covered, stumbles into view, adjusting his belt and smiling like he just survived a trial by sponge. The crowd is gathering once more. The couple will soon walk the procession together toward a wedding meal that smells like heaven and probably tastes like turnips. But for now, they're both clean, at least on the outside. You know that moment in modern weddings where the music swells, the crowd stands, and the bride appears in a gown that costs more than your first car? Yeah, this isn't that. In this village, the bride's outfit is held together with skill, superstition, and maybe a few hopeful stitches. Greta emerges from her cottage to a round of whistles, claps, and one enthusiastic woo from a cousin who's already dipped into the pre-feast ale. She looks radiant in a way that only someone recently scrubbed and rosemary-scented can. But her outfit is what really draws the eyes, because it's a walking patchwork of symbolism and survival. She's wearing a gown dyed deep blue, thanks to a woad mixture that stained the bucket and possibly the neighbor's goat. Blue was the color of fidelity and purity before white stole the show centuries later. It's also practical. It hides stains better. And in a world where stains are a lifestyle, that matters. The dress fits. Mostly. It's been worn before, by her mother, her aunt, and one woman who famously gave birth in it mid-feast. Greta had it refitted, adding a stitched panel in the back and a few decorative touches in green thread. Green, after all, was considered a lucky color in many places, associated with life, fertility, and moss. Lots of moss. She wears a simple belt made of braided cloth, with small wooden charms hanging from it. One is a carved comb, another, a spoon. A third might be a hedgehog. You don't ask. These are tokens, each meant to bless the marriage with a skill or trait, wisdom, domestic luck, and, presumably, prickly independence. Historians still debate how formal peasant wedding attire really was. Some suggest special garments were saved for the day. Others believe brides simply wore their best tunic. In wealthier communities, veils, lace, and imported fabrics were more common, but here, a clean, colorful gown and a crown of herbs would do just fine. Greta's hair is neatly braided and coiled into loops pinned with wooden sticks carved into floral shapes. A simple veil of linen is draped over her head, held in place with a twist of braided rosemary and rue. Good for warding off envy, lice, and possibly in-laws. And then, disaster. One of the veil's pins slips. The linen sheet flutters down. Greta's aunt gasps and immediately declares it a very bad sign. A moment later, a village boy trips over the duck and faceplants in the mud, which doesn't exactly improve the vibe. Greta, however, is unbothered. She scoops up the veil, wipes it off, and pins it back with a grin. "If bad luck wanted to stop this wedding," she says loudly, "it should have spoken up before the cider was tapped." The crowd laughs. Someone hands her a meat pie in support. Meanwhile, Tomas arrives looking, well, about as good as any man can after a scrub down, accidental flooring, and having been dressed by 3 other men arguing over whether he should wear shoes. His tunic is dark brown and clearly meant for someone broader in the shoulders. A leather belt cinches it all together, complete with a ceremonial dagger tucked in. Not for fighting, but for looking important. The blade is dull. Probably. Hopefully. He wears a simple linen cap, slightly crooked, and boots that might be on the wrong feet. A few sprigs of thyme have been tucked into his collar by a well-meaning cousin. He smells faintly of mint and soap and nerves. Quirky detail. Some medieval villages believed in stitching secret messages or blessings into the sea. Misses of wedding garments, words, symbols, even tiny charms sewn between the layers of fabric. Greta's aunt insists there's a small sprig of vervain stitched into her hem. You have no idea what vervain does, but it sounds impressive and vaguely magical. The crowd circles around the couple now, admiring the outfits, commenting loudly on the cut of Tomas's sleeves. Bit long, innit? And the fact that Greta's shoes don't match. It's a sign she walks her own path, someone says solemnly. And then comes the shoe joke. In some medieval wedding traditions, someone would try to steal the bride's shoe before the ceremony, symbolizing either a final test of readiness or just a chance to mess with her. Greta, anticipating this, has strapped hers on tightly and added an extra loop of leather. She's prepared for war. A cousin tries to snatch one anyway, Greta knees him in the side gently but firmly. He retreats. The crowd approves. You realize now that the whole point of the outfit isn't elegance, it's resilience. This isn't fashion for the runway. It's symbolism worn on the body, dyed fabrics to signal loyalty, charms to encourage abundance, braids and belts and stitching passed through generations. Every piece says something. Every part is a wish. Greta and Tomas stand side by side. They look at each other and laugh, nervous, delighted, ready for the ridiculousness that awaits. Someone plays a flourish on a flute. It's off-key, perfect. And just like that, it's time for the procession. But first, Greta adjusts the wooden hedgehog charm on her belt. She gives it a tap for luck. You do the same. You've been to weddings with calligraphy invitations, embossed wax seals, RSVP deadlines, and 5-color seating charts. This is not that. In Greta and Tomas's world, the invitations were shouted from a hay cart 3 days ago by a very loud boy with a cracked voice and no sense of direction. He managed to hit most of the village, skipped the miller's house entirely, and accidentally invited a pig that wandered out of the woods. The pig showed up anyway, wearing a flower crown. No one's questioned it. You're standing near the edge of the green, where benches have been dragged into rough rows, and someone's driven a stick into the earth to hang a cloth banner that reads something like Gret plus Thomas in smudged charcoal letters. It flutters proudly, if unevenly. The entire scene feels like a potluck run by very determined squirrels. In medieval rural communities, formal written invitations were about as common as silk napkins. Literacy was limited, paper was precious, and ink was not to be wasted on telling someone to come eat your bread and maybe dance. Instead, wedding news spread via word of mouth, town criers, parish announcements, and good old-fashioned yelling across fields. Historians still argue whether certain communities had more structured systems for spreading wedding news. Some suggest the priest might list upcoming unions alongside the weekly bans. Others point to feasts being public by default. After all, the line between private event and community gathering was blurred, often intentionally. Greta's family, practical as ever, simply told everyone who passed by their house that a wedding was coming, and they told them loudly. If you didn't hear, you probably weren't paying attention, or you were the pig. Some guests have arrived in relative finery, tunics with fewer holes, cleanish cloaks, boots that mostly match. Others came straight from the Fies. Elds, with mud on their hems and sunburned foreheads. One elderly woman is still holding a turnip she was halfway through digging up when she heard the wedding had started. She's kept it as a snack, or a weapon. It's unclear. You spot the potter's son trying to wrangle a goose wrapped in ribbon. It's for luck, he insists, though the goose clearly disagrees. Across the green, someone has laid out a table covered in trenchers. Stale bread plates that will later double as food and napkins and possibly weapons in the inevitable pie fight. The crowd grows steadily, swelling with cousins, neighbors, and people who may or may not be related to either family. But in medieval villages, that doesn't really matter. If you've seen the bride cry at a funeral or lent the groom a shovel, you're invited. A fringe tradition, you notice. Someone has hung branches of hawthorn and rowan at the corners of the gathering space. Not for decoration, well, also for decoration, but mostly for protection. These plants are believed to guard against ill will, witches, and misfortune, all of which apparently tend to crash weddings like distant uncles. A man approaches you holding a clay cup full of something frothy. "First drink's free," he says, grinning. You accept. It tastes like someone dropped an apple in a vat of smoke and told it a joke. Not bad. Suddenly a burst of music. A whistle, a drum, and something that might be a hurdy-gurdy but could also be a cat in distress. The band, 4 enthusiastic villagers and 1 sheep with a bell, is warming up. The tunes are cheerful, lilting, and just slightly offbeat. Someone tries to clap along, fails, and claps anyway. Greta and Tomas appear at the edge of the green. The crowd parts, making a lopsided aisle. The couple walks slowly, hand in hand, as people toss herbs and small bits of dried bread in their path. A symbolic gesture, meant to bless two. Heir walk into shared life. Or maybe it's just old bread. Children race ahead of them, shouting rhymes. One small girl holds a wooden spoon high like a scepter, declaring herself queen of the wedding porridge. No one challenges her claim. In one corner, the priest is trying to shoo away a chicken from the ceremonial goblet. It pecks at his sandal with great purpose. There's no assigned seating, no carefully arranged centerpieces, just community, noise, anticipation, and the overwhelming scent of rosemary, ale, and livestock. Another local custom. Someone from each family carries a loaf of bread to the feast, not just to eat, but to represent prosperity and sharing. Greta's family brings a round loaf studded with herbs. Tomas's cousin carries a flatter, sadder-looking one that smells faintly of onions and defeat. Everyone cheers anyway. As the couple reaches the center of the green, a spontaneous song erupts. The words change with each verse, improvised and deeply questionable in rhyme, but the melody holds steady. You hum along, even though you don't know the words. No one does. That's part of the fun. One old man claims this is the best turnout he's seen in decades. Even the gravedigger came, he says, nodding toward a very serious man holding a flower pot and a spoon. And just when you think the chaos is over, someone rolls in a cart full of turnips, each decorated with crude smiling faces. The turnip parade, someone explains. It's a fertility blessing. You nod slowly, pretending this is perfectly normal. In a way, it is. This isn't about perfect planning or stunning centerpieces. It's about noise and closeness, and the idea that if enough people witness your union, if enough people sing and throw bread and avoid being bitten by ducks, it will be strong enough to survive storms, sickness, and stubborn in-laws. The couple smiles, the crowd roars, the pig dances, and you, for reasons you don't quite understand, feel strangely honored to be here. The crowd has gathered. The bread has been blessed. The duck has stopped interrupting the priest, which means only one thing. It's time for the wedding procession. You find yourself being jostled into a loosely formed parade that looks like it was organized by sleep-deprived jugglers. There's no order, no neat pairing off, just a cheerful mess of villagers, family members, ale-laden cousins, and livestock in various states of cooperation. Greta and Tomas walk side by side at the front, arms linked, moving with that peculiar mixture of pride and please don't trip on a root that defines all good procession energy. Greta's veil flutters like a battle standard. Tomas keeps adjusting his belt, which seems to have developed a personality of its own. In many parts of medieval Europe, the wedding procession was a big deal, a public display of the new union, complete with noise, music, and lots of stomping. In some traditions, the bride was led from her home to the church. In others, the couple walked together from the church to the feast. Either way, the walking part was crucial. Symbolic of moving forward into new life, or possibly just a good excuse to show off your clean outfit before the gravy stains began. And today's walk is no quiet stroll. Ahead of you, someone's banging a drum with more enthusiasm than rhythm. Behind you, a boy is playing a reed pipe that hits notes not known to nature. To your left, the love lamb from earlier has returned, this time wearing a flower garland and being led by a toddler with sticky fingers. Every few paces, someone shouts a blessing. May your goats be fertile. May your roof stay on. May your mother-in-law be only moderately involved. It's chaos. Glorious, muddy, cabbage-scented chaos. You notice that some villagers are carrying symbolic items. One woman has a loaf of rye bread held aloft like a holy relic. A man follows with a jug of ale tied with twine. A child drags a garlanded stick decorated with dried apples, representing abundance. And then there's the man with the turnip again. He waves it like a torch. You don't ask questions anymore. You just nod and carry on. Quirky detail time. In certain traditions, the wedding procession included noisemakers to ward off evil spirits. Not just music, but purposeful clanging, pots, pans, bells, whatever made a racket. The belief was that malicious forces hated sound and would flee the scene, leaving the couple safe from curses, envy, or unexpected tax collectors. The procession winds through the village, past the blacksmith's forge, the grain barn, and the shallow river that smells like old mint and adventure. Children dart in and out, some waving streamers, others chasing a dog who has proudly stolen a sausage. At one point, the group pauses outside Greta and Tomas's future home, a small timber-framed cottage with a roof that leans westward and a door that whistles when it's windy. Greta touches the lintel gently. Someone from her family scatters flower petals on the doorstep. It's not officially their home yet, but everyone knows it soon will be. The priest mumbles a short blessing, trips on his robe, and is saved from falling into the butter churn by the gravedigger. You turn down the final path toward the green where the feast awaits. From this vantage point, it looks like a medieval fair. Tables groaning under piles of bread, bowls of stew, jugs of cider, and at least one suspiciously wobbly tower of cheese. There are benches, barrels, hay bales, and a curious seating system that appears to be sit wherever your cousin isn't already asleep. The musicians gather near a tree stump and launch into something vaguely melodic. The tempo is upbeat, the clapping is uneven. Someone throws a handful of herbs into the air, and it rains mint. The procession dissolves as people pour into the feast area. Greta and Tomas are led to two carved chairs draped in wool and flower garlands. These aren't thrones, but they're as close as it gets. They sit, smiling, flushed with joy and adrenaline. Tomas whispers something to Greta, and she laughs, covering her mouth with one hand. You find a spot near a barrel and settle in. Someone hands you a cup of something vaguely peach-colored. It tastes like sunshine filtered through a wet boot, but it grows on you. Fringe tidbit. In some places, the community would carry the bride and groom around on makeshift litters or even wheelbarrows, especially if they were younger or popular. It was a show of affection, and occasionally, poor judgment. One cousin tries to suggest this, and Greta shuts it down with a single raised eyebrow. The cousin wisely backs away. The sun is well past its peak now, casting golden shadows across the green. Everything feels warm and buzzing. The procession is over, but the momentum carries forward. The noise, the laughter, the stomping, it all hums like a giant living creature. You're no longer just an observer. You're part of it. Covered in dust, holding a drink, seated between two elderly women who keep shoving pickled vegetables into your hands. You smile, you chew. You hope that last one was turnip. The feast is about to begin. But for now, the couple just sits and breathes, their hands resting side by side. It's the calm before the storm of stew. You barely have time to settle in before the ceremony begins in earnest. Or rather, the second ceremony. Because as you've gathered by now, medieval weddings aren't about tidy timelines or bullet-pointed agendas. They unfold like hay bales rolling downhill, unpredictable, lumpy, and occasionally full of mice. The couple rises. Tomas clears his throat. Greta adjusts her veil. The priest, looking slightly less anxious now that the duck has wandered off, takes his place between them. The crowd quiets, save for one child making fart noises with their armpit, quickly silenced by a grandmotherly glare that could curdle milk. And so it begins. The priest opens his worn book and launches into the official words. It's mostly Latin, laced with the occasional local dialect, and delivered with the confidence of a man who once lost his place during a baptism and accidentally blessed a loaf of rye bread instead of the baby. You catch familiar phrases, in nomine patris, and quod Deus coniungit, which loosely translate to, in the name of the Father, and what God has joined together. The rhythm is slow and reverent. People murmur responses, crossing themselves or nodding with varying levels of enthusiasm. Historians still argue whether all village priests were fully trained or just very confident amateurs. Some had formal schooling, others were appointed locally and learned on the job, one mispronounced sacrament at a time. Tomas looks like he's trying not to blink too hard. Greta is composed, hands folded, posture straight. You realize she's probably rehearsed this moment in her head for years, maybe while churning butter or pretending not to notice Tomas lurking near her cabbage rows. Then comes the moment of verba de presenti, the spoken vows. Unlike modern weddings where couples might write flowery sonnets about their shared love of hiking and cinnamon buns, medieval vows were simpler and more formulaic. The bride and groom were expected to say something like, "I take thee, Greta, to be my wedded wife," or, in some places, simply, "I thee wed." The crucial thing? It had to be spoken publicly, clearly, and willingly. That last bit was serious. Forced marriages were discouraged, even if they happened more often than anyone liked to admit. Thomas speaks first. His voice wobbles slightly, but he finds his footing. "I take thee, Greta, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold." His accent thickens halfway through, but no one minds. It's sincere, and the local baker gives a quiet, "Aw." Then Greta speaks. Her voice is steady, clear. She doesn't rush. She says the words with conviction, as though every syllable is a nail securing a ship before it sets sail. The priest nods, satisfied. Then he fumbles through his robe pockets and pulls out a ribbon, green and gold, slightly frayed, and ties it gently around their joined hands. Hand fasting, it's called. An old tradition, sometimes condemned by the church but still used by many. It symbolizes unity, binding the couple physically and spiritually. This isn't just a romantic gesture, it's practical. You can't run away when someone's tied you to another person with half a curtain sash. A few villagers wipe tears. One man openly sobs into a turnip. Now, rings. Do they have them? You squint. Tomas reaches into a pouch at his belt and pulls out a small copper band. It's not fancy, not even entirely circular, but he places it gently on Greta's finger, murmuring something too soft for you to hear. Fringe fact: in some rural communities, rings were considered a luxury. Many weddings simply skipped them or substituted something else, a coin, a garland, or in one recorded case, a spoon. You suspect that wedding didn't last. Greta slips a braided cord onto Tomas's wrist. It's symbolic, clearly homemade, and you suspect it smells faintly of dried apple peel. The crowd loves it. The priest raises his hands, delivers a final benediction. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus. And after a brief hiccup, where he steps on his own hem, declares them husband and wife. The crowd erupts. Cheers, whistles, clapping, and someone banging two ladles together like cymbals. A child throws dried peas with dramatic flair. The goose returns. You feel a wave of warmth, partly from the moment, partly from the cider that's finally kicking in. This isn't a pageant. It isn't polished. But it's real. It's messy and heartfelt and witnessed by everyone who matters. And there's no kiss. That's right. Contrary to modern Hollywood depictions, the public kiss wasn't a guaranteed part of medieval wedding ceremonies, especially among the lower classes. Some couples might exchange a quick peck. Others saved that for later, in private, or never. Kisses were, like everything else, deeply dependent on local custom and personal comfort. Instead, Greta and Tomas exchange a look. One of those rare, quiet looks that says, "We did it. We're in this together. Forever, or until the next cow gets loose." Then Tomas lifts their joined hands, ribbon still intact, and shouts, "Let's eat!" The crowd roars in approval. As they walk to the head of the feast table, children run ahead scattering flowers and grain. The priest disappears somewhere behind the bread cart, possibly in search of stronger drink. The sun glints off copper mugs and fire-roasted meat. The band plays a tune that might be about frogs. Everyone laughs. You blink, slowly. You feel it too. That odd mix of joy and calm, like the world has paused for a single golden hour to celebrate two slightly sweaty humans choosing each other. And best of all, no one's asked you to dance. Yet. Now comes the part your stomach has been rumbling about since the ceremony started. The feast. The wedding green has been transformed. Tables, if you can call them that, stretch across the grass like a crooked spine of joy. They're cobbled together from carts, crates, old doors balanced on barrels, and the occasional unsteady workbench. Cloths of all kinds are spread across them, some linen, some wool, some that were probably curtains yesterday. Everything smells like roasted onions, herbs, baked bread, and the subtle undertone of damp hay and sweat, but in the best way. Greta and Tomas are seated at the high table, which isn't particularly high. It's just a plank of wood with a somewhat cleaner cloth and two chairs that almost match. They're handed mugs the size of their heads and slices of bread so thick they could serve as sandals in an emergency. You take a place near a juggler who smells like pickled herring and is attempting to balance a spoon on his nose. His success rate is low, but his commitment is admirable. Feasting customs in the medieval countryside weren't about delicacy or cutlery. There's no silverware, no finger bowls, and absolutely no one is asking about gluten-free options. Food is served communally, and you eat with your hands. If you're lucky, someone gives you a trench, essentially a stale slice of bread used as a plate, later eaten or given to the poor, or to very patient dogs. First come the stews, boiling pots of vegetables, root crops, and whatever meat was available. Today's includes chicken, leeks, and something unidentifiable that tastes like it once swam. Or perhaps slithered. No one questions it. You dunk a hunk of bread into the broth and try not to burn your tongue. Then there are meat pies. Oh, the pies. Some are thick and savory with hints of sage and garlic, others a bit more chewy. One guest insists his pie contains squirrel, another says mole, a third says don't ask questions and offers you a second helping.
Greta slips a braided cord onto Tomas's wrist. It's symbolic, clearly homemade, and you suspect it smells faintly of dried apple peel. The crowd loves it. The priest raises his hands, delivers a final benediction, benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, and, after a brief hiccup where he steps on his own hem, declares them husband and wife. The crowd erupts. Cheers, whistles, clapping, and someone banging two ladles together like cymbals. A child throws dried peas with dramatic flair. The goose returns. You feel a wave of warmth, partly from the moment, partly from the cider that's finally kicking in. This isn't a pageant. It isn't polished. But it's real. It's messy and heartfelt and witnessed by everyone who matters, and there's no kiss that's right. Contrary to modern Hollywood depictions, the public kiss wasn't a guaranteed part of medieval wedding ceremonies, especially among the lower classes. Some couples might exchange a quick peck. Others saved that for later, in private. Or never. Kisses were, like everything else, deeply dependent on local custom and personal comfort. Instead, Greta and Tomas exchange a look. One of those rare, quiet looks that says, "We did it. We're in this together. Forever, or until the next cow gets loose." Then Tomas lifts their joined hands, ribbons still intact, and shouts, "Let's eat." The crowd roars in approval. As they walk to the head of the feast table, children run ahead scattering flowers and grain. The priest disappears somewhere behind the bread cart, possibly in search of stronger drink. The sun glints off copper mugs and fire-roasted meat. The band plays a tune that might be about frogs. Everyone laughs. You blink, slowly. You feel it too, that odd mix of joy and calm, like the world has paused for a single golden hour to celebrate two slightly sweaty humans choosing each other, and best of all, no one's asked you to dank. Eat, yet, now comes the part your stomach has been rumbling about since the ceremony started. The feast, the wedding green has been transformed. Tables, if you can call them that, stretch across the grass like a crooked spine of joy. They're cobbled together from carts, crates, old doors balanced on barrels, and the occasional unsteady workbench. Cloths of all kinds are spread across them, some linen, some wool, some that were probably curtains yesterday. Everything smells like roasted onions, herbs, baked bread, and the subtle undertone of damp hay and sweat. But in the best way, Greta and Tomas are seated at the high table, which isn't particularly high. It's just a plank of wood with a somewhat cleaner cloth and two chairs that almost match. They're handed mugs the size of their heads and slices of bread so thick they could serve as sandals in an emergency. You take a place near a juggler who smells like pickled herring and is attempting to balance a spoon on his nose. His success rate is low, but his commitment is admirable. Feasting customs in the medieval countryside weren't about delicacy or cutlery. There's no silverware, no finger bowls, and absolutely no one is asking about gluten-free options. Food is served communally, and you eat with your hands. If you're lucky, someone gives you a trench, essentially a stale slice of bread used as a plate, later eaten or given to the poor, or to very patient dogs. First come the stews, boiling pots of vegetables, root crops, and whatever meat was available. Today's includes chicken, leeks, and something unidentifiable that tastes like it once swam. Or perhaps slithered. No one questions it. You dunk a hunk of bread into the broth and try not to burn your tongue. Then there are meat pies. Oh, the pies. Some are thick and savory with hints of sage and garlic, others a bit more chewy. One guest insists his pie contains squirrel. Another says mole. A third says, don't ask questions, and offers you a second helping.
You're handed a skewer of grilled mushrooms and something that might be eel. It's smoky, spicy, and surprisingly delightful. You nod your thanks to the cook, a woman wearing a soot-covered apron and a crown made of herbs, who might also be the village apothecary, or sheriff, or both. Historians agree that food played a central role in marriage celebrations, especially for peasants. A generous feast reflected not just the family's resources, but the community's support. Everyone brought something, bartered, contributed, shared. This wasn't just about feeding guests, it was about weaving them into the story of the couple. A fringe tidbit. In some areas, the bride ale was a specific part of the feast, a special batch of ale brewed by the bride's family, sold during the feast, with proceeds helping fund the couple's future. Greta's cousin pours you a foamy mug from one such barrel. It tastes like apples, wildflowers, and a hint of anxiety. Perfect. The juggler beside you finally balances the spoon for 3 whole seconds. Everyone applauds. A child shouts, "Do it again!" He obliges. The spoon falls into the gravy. Unfazed, he eats it anyway. Suddenly, someone at the far end of the table stands and bellows, "Turnip!" A cheer rises. It's time for the communal vegetable toast. Yes, that's a thing. Everyone lifts a piece of vegetable, turnip, parsnip, leek, whatever they can find, and shouts blessings toward the couple. May your hearth be hot. May your geese lay golden eggs. May you never run out of lard. Greta and Tomas raise their mugs, laughing so hard Tomas nearly snorts ale. The music swells, fiddles, flutes, and that one-stringed instrument that may have been built by someone very tired and very imaginative. It's joyous, crooked, and absolutely perfect. Desserts appear in a fashion. Flat cakes made of honey, flour, and spices. Sticky things wrapped in leaves. Ends. Oots, roasted and sweetened with whatever the bees have spared. Someone passes you a candied beet. It is ambitious. Quirky moment. One elderly guest insists on performing a traditional pudding dance, which involves stomping, humming, and waving a ladle. Everyone joins in. The pudding is never revealed, but the dance is a hit. As the feast continues, stories are told. Old folks recount their own weddings, some joyful, some hilariously tragic. One woman remembers her husband fainting at the altar. Another tells how a goat stole her veil and ran into the forest. Tomas's uncle confesses he once proposed to the wrong sister. "It was dark," he says defensively. Greta leans over to Tomas. You catch snippets. "Can't believe they ate all the plum tarts." And, "Your aunt has definitely cursed the wine again." The sun begins to dip low, casting long shadows across the green. Candles are lit, tucked into jars or wedged into cabbages. Fire pits crackle. Someone starts playing a slow tune on a reed pipe. A few couples sway, others slump full-bellied in the grass. You, now holding a third mug of something with floaty bits, lean back and take it all in. The laughter, the glow, the clink of mugs, and the warm, dusty air. This feast isn't just about food. It's a celebration of surviving another season, of tying two lives together with knots made of bread, broth, and half-remembered songs. And you know deep in your cider-soaked soul, the stew might have contained eel, but the joy, that's unmistakably real. You haven't even finished licking the honey off your fingers when the first drumbeat shakes the evening air. It starts slow, a rhythmic, deliberate thump from a leather-skinned drum the size of a washtub. Then comes a shrill pipe melody that zigzags like a drunk bee, followed by clapping, stomping, and a shout. "Time to dance, you muddy miracles!" And just like that, the feast slips into frenzy. Welcome to the medieval after-party, where formality dissolves into flower-slinging, off-key singing, and a general disregard for gravity or dignity. You shuffle toward the edge of the green where space has been cleared for dancing. A rough square is marked out with bits of rope, turnip halves, and the occasional abandoned boot. The musicians stand atop two crates and a wobbly barrel, belting out tunes with the enthusiasm of men who know they'll be paid in leftover pie and foot rubs. The first dancers are eager, mostly teenagers and a few suspiciously spry elders. Arms link, feet stomp, someone cartwheels. A dog joins in and is immediately declared best dancer by popular vote. You notice Greta and Tomas being dragged into the circle by cheering friends. Greta lifts her skirt and kicks with surprising precision. Tomas bounces like a man who just remembered he still has soup in his socks but is choosing joy anyway. Medieval dancing wasn't what you'd call refined. There were no ballroom glides or carefully memorized steps, at least not in the countryside. Most dances were communal, repetitive, and lively. Circles, lines, hopping in rhythm. Think, very ambitious group therapy with vegetables. Fringe tidbit. One popular type of dance was the carol, a circle dance accompanied by singing. Everyone joined hands and moved in unison, often making up lyrics as they went. You witness something similar now as the villagers shout rhymes about geese, love, and something indecipherable involving a spoon and a saint. Tomas's uncle trips on a log and is gently rolled to the side like a barrel. He gives a thumbs up. A child hands him a cooked beet. All is well. The music changes tempo. A woman with bells on her ankles claps out a rhythm. A man juggles apples until one hits him in the head and he declares himself blessed by the orchard spirits. The energy spirals upward. You can't help but grin. And then someone shouts, "Pig race!" You blink. A group of younger boys lead two pigs, both slightly confused and wearing flower garlands, into the circle. Bets are shouted. Coins clink. The pigs snort. Then they're released, oinking and galloping with the enthusiasm of animals who know they are probably next on the menu. The winner is Martha, who earns an extra carrot and a suspicious kiss on the snout. The loser is promptly adopted by the juggler. No one asks questions. The musicians now strike up a song everyone seems to know. Something bawdy, melodic, and definitely not suitable for church. Even the gravedigger joins in, tapping a spoon on his boot with the rhythm of a man who's buried more than just bad dancers. And just when the night seems to be reaching peak chaos, a new tradition rears its head, the stealing of the bride's shoe. Yes, it's back. A group of groomsmen and one very enthusiastic aunt make a sudden, theatrical grab for Greta's foot. She shrieks with laughter, kicks one of them squarely in the shin, and runs across the green, veil flying, garland askew, while half the village chases her. This ritual, found in various local traditions, symbolizes fertility, luck, or possibly just an excuse for people to fall over in the dark. Greta is finally caught near the barrel fire, where she reclaims her shoe and smacks Tomas over the head with it in jest. The crowd howls. You're handed another drink, this one fizzy, mysterious, and possibly illegal. You sip it, it burns, you smile anyway. The fire grows, sparks shoot into the stars. Some people are now lying in the grass, pointing at constellations. Others dance in slower circles, holding hands or mugs or each other. Greta and Tomas settle near the fire, glowing with sweat and happiness and possibly mushroom fumes. They lean into one another. She feeds him a piece of dried apple, he eyes something that makes her snort ale out of her nose. It is, in every sense, perfect. Then someone, not drunk, just enthusiastic, yells, "Story time!" Suddenly, elders are summoned. Benches are dragged forward. The fire becomes a stage. A man with one eyebrow and 7 rings on his fingers begins to tell the tale of a wedding where the bride turned into a cat. Everyone listens intently, even though half of them were present at that wedding and know the story ends with a barn fire and a missing cow. This is the soul of the after-party: dancing, storytelling, and the collective agreement to let things get weird. Historians still debate whether peasant weddings always ended this way or if it was more regional, but the truth is, people craved celebration. Life was hard, unpredictable, full of toil. Weddings weren't just for the couple, they were for the village. A chance to rest, laugh, and remember why humans bothered staying alive through all the mud and plague. You sit back, full of stew and song and too much turnip. The stars wheel above you. Someone's playing a slow melody on a bone flute. A dog curls beside you, snoring. Greta and Tomas kiss, not showy, not staged, just a quiet kiss as the fire crackles and the crowd sways. You exhale. They're married. The night is still young, and there's still time for one more dance. The dancing slows, the stew is mostly gone, and the moon hangs overhead like a peeled turnip in the sky, round, glowing, slightly pale. But the festivities? Oh, they're far from over. Because now comes the strangest part of the evening, the games. You'd think, after a full day of feasting and flailing around in circles, folks would be ready to sit down and quietly digest. But no, this is the medieval countryside, where entertainment is not optional, it's necessary. Especially if you've got leftover bread, questionable cider, and several uncles who insist they could have been knights if only their knees hadn't betrayed them. It begins, us with a shout, "The groom's challenge!" Suddenly Tomas is dragged into the center of the green. He looks mildly alarmed. A stool is placed in front of him. On it sits a potato. Well, a root vegetable of some kind. Possibly a very angry beet. Greta stands nearby, arms crossed and grinning. She nods. Tomas sighs. He's told to prove his readiness for marriage by reciting the names of all Greta's cousins in birth order. The crowd roars. Tomas clears his throat and begins, "There's Marta, Big Marta, Little Marta, Marta with the mole." He gets as far as 6 before collapsing into laughter and begging mercy. A mug is passed in his honor. The crowd declares him close enough. Historically, post-wedding games varied by region and culture. Some were physical contests, sack races, wrestling matches, or contests to see who could carry the bride the furthest without dropping her or their dignity. Others were verbal, riddles, jokes, storytelling duels. The common thread? Fun, laughter, and a community participating in the couple's union. Next comes the Guess the Spouse challenge. Greta is blindfolded with a napkin embroidered with ducks. 5 men are led in front of her, each told to say something Tomas might say. Greta must identify her new husband based on his voice alone. The first man says, "I like stew." The second says, "My feet are cold." The third says, "I hope we have goats someday." She pauses. Then the fourth voice says, "Greta, if you steal the covers tonight, I will not complain. Much." She grins and points. That one. Correct. The crowd cheers. Someone throws a beat in celebration. You duck. A fringe tradition unfolds. The ale relay. 4 cousins line up, each handed a mug. They must carry it to the other end of the green without spilling while walking backward, wearing a pair of old church shoes tied together. You witness 2 heroic efforts. One teammate, Rajic Spill, and a boy who simply drinks his ale halfway through and declares himself spiritually complete. Now it's the bride's turn. Greta is seated on a stool while a group of younger children approach with gifts, small tokens, drawings, flowers, and in one case, a live beetle inside a walnut shell. She accepts each with a curtsy and kind words. One child sings her a song about love and chickens. Greta wipes away a tear. The beetle escapes. In some traditions, this portion of the evening was used to test the bride's readiness for marriage, though here, it's more about celebrating her wit and kindness. Someone asks Greta to name her favorite herb. She replies, whichever keeps Tomas from snoring. The laughter that follows nearly topples a pie table. You notice a group of old women sitting near the fire, weaving something from straw and thread. It's a small effigy, 2 figures with joined hands, a folk token, likely to be burned or buried as a symbol of the couple's bond. One of the women waves you over and lets you tie a thread around the wrists. You do so, a little clumsily. She pats your hand and says, "Now, you're part of it." More games follow. One guest attempts a handstand. Another recites a poem about onions. The juggler from earlier is now juggling only spoons, 4 of them, all bent. The crowd is riveted. Someone suggests a mock duel. 2 brothers step forward and begin fencing with broomsticks, arguing about whose tunic is more fashionable. It ends in laughter, a sprained ankle, and the awarding of a pickled egg to the victor. And just when you think it's over, a quiet hush falls. A figure steps forward from the shadows, an elder with silver hair, a robe stitched with symbols, and a face like an ancient elm tree. Everyone quiets. The children sit. Even the goose goes still. This is the village storyteller, or seer, or honorary uncle, possibly all 3. He begins a tale, not of Greta and Tomas, but of 2 lovers who once danced in the same meadow Generaci, ons ego. He speaks of longing, patience, shared toil, and quiet joys. His voice is deep, slow, as rich as dark honey. You feel yourself sinking into it, lulled by the rise and fall of his words. The tale ends with a blessing. May your union be long, your quarrels short, and your stew always thick. The crowd murmurs approval. Greta leans her head on Tomas's shoulder. A few guests have begun to drift away. Parents with sleepy toddlers, older neighbors with early chores, but many remain. The fire burns low. The stars press closer. Somewhere, a fiddle continues to hum. And you, sitting now with a warm mug in your hands and laughter still echoing in your chest, realize that this wasn't just a celebration, it was a spell. Cast in song, sealed with pie, and bound by the joy of ordinary people doing something extraordinary, promising to share everything, mud, mirth, and mystery, for the rest of their days. It's late now. The fire has burned down to gentle coals, glowing like sleepy eyes in the dark. Most of the children have either collapsed into their parents' arms or formed a heap under a cart, limbs tangled, dreams full of dancing pigs and honey cakes. But the celebration is not quite over. A hush settles across the green as the final ritual of the evening is prepared, quietly, reverently, and with just the slightest amount of embarrassed coughing. This is the part people pretend not to care about while secretly leaning in for every word. It's time for the bridal bed ceremony. Now don't panic. This is not what you think. There's no scandal, no voyeurism, just a bizarre PG-rated blend of tradition, community, and emotional multitasking that somehow blends sacredness and slapstick in equal measure. You follow the quiet procession toward the couple's new home. Greta and Tomas walk at the front, hand in hand, smiling tiredly. Behind them trail a mix of relatives, Frau Asin, Ens, a priest with a candle, and 3 aunties wielding clean linens like holy relics. In medieval rural communities, the bedding ceremony was symbolic, a public escort to the couple's new shared bed, performed with solemn joy, gentle teasing, and occasionally livestock. The goal wasn't scandal, it was acknowledgement. A public witness that the union was not just formal, but now domestic. The couple had a home, a bed, a future. You reach the cottage. The door swings open to reveal a freshly cleaned room, straw swept, bed newly stuffed with sweet-smelling herbs, blankets folded with pride. A garland of greenery hangs above the headboard. In one corner, someone's placed a jug of ale and a chunk of bread, in case they get hungry later. Sure. The bride and groom step inside. The crowd gathers respectfully at the threshold, peering in like polite raccoons. Aunt Marta leads the ceremony. She's tiny, ancient, and sharp as vinegar. She directs the couple to sit on the edge of the bed while she fluffs the pillows like she's blessing a throne. Then she leads a short rhyming chant, which the crowd repeats in cheerful murmurs. Bless this bed with love and bread, no cold feet and no tears shed. May dreams be sweet, the roof stay dry, and babies come, though not just yet, oh my. Everyone laughs at the last line. Tomas turns red. Greta grins wickedly. Historians still argue how widespread or intimate these rituals were. In noble households, the bedding ceremony could be intensely public, sometimes even involving witnesses to the couple climbing into bed, fully clothed, with the curtains drawn around them. Peasant communities were generally more restrained. The ceremony was less about spectacle and more about shared joy and neighborly blessing. Quirky detail. In some places, a pair of shoes was placed at the foot of the bed, pointing inward to symbolize togetherness. Here, someone has placed 2 wooden clogs, mismatched and slightly muddy, but lovingly arranged. One even has a sprig of thyme tied to the toe. The priest says a short prayer. It's soft, more mumbled than spoken, but you catch bits. Peace, plenty, patience. And then, more surprisingly, laughter. Let them laugh together, Lord, he says, even when the bread burns and the roof leaks. Now comes the moment everyone's waiting for, the tucking in. That's right. Greta and Tomas climb into the bed, still fully dressed, shoes removed, awkwardly cozy. Aunt Marta pulls the blanket up to their chins and pats it down like she's pressing seeds into soil. Then she declares, "Well, that's that," and turns to the crowd. Everyone cheers. And then, because medieval people cannot resist mischief, someone shouts, "Time for the sock test!" The crowd roars. Before you can ask what that means, a cousin tosses a single clean wool sock into the bed. The couple must find it using only their feet. This leads to much giggling, a minor pillow skirmish, and Greta emerging victorious, sock held high like a banner. She is promptly crowned Queen of Socks. You learn that this odd little tradition, or something like it, appears in several folk variants, some involving shoes, some involving eggs, and one baffling version with a spoonful of honey tied to a string. The point? To end the night with laughter, connection, and a very public sense that all is well. Slowly the crowd begins to drift away. A few whisper blessings. Some leave small tokens near the hearth. A coin, a sprig of rosemary, a carved button. You linger a moment longer. The room is warm, lit by one flickering candle. Greta and Tomas wave at you sleepily from the bed, cheeks pink, hair mussed, eyes wide with something new and beautiful, and quietly terrifying. The beginning of forever. You smile, step outside, and pull the door gently shut behind you. The night air is cooler now. Crickets sing. Smoke drifts lazily from the feast fires, and somewhere in the dark, someone's still strumming a lute. And the newlyweds. They're tucked in, safe and loved, in a house that smells like herbs and bread, and the quiet joy of 2 lives just beginning to merge. You walk back toward your own cot, or hay pile, or barn loft, feeling like you've seen something ancient and soft and real. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a blanket, a candle, and the world whispering, "You're home now." You wake to birdsong, or what sounds like birds arguing over breadcrumbs, and a pale blue light creeping over the village. The wedding is over. But as you stretch your limbs and brush straw from your cloak, you catch wind of something unusual. Distant hooves, the glint of polished leather, and the faint scent of rosewater and bureaucracy. You're about to discover what weddings look like when money is no object. Word has spread that a noble wedding is taking place not far from the village. Curiosity pulls you like a tide, and you soon find yourself trudging toward the nearby manor grounds. The grass is oddly trimmed. The air smells faintly of expensive perfume and responsibility. A boy in livery eyes your boots and tries not to gag. You arrive just in time to see the bride descend from a litter adorned with embroidered silks, trailing a veil so long it requires 3 girls just to keep it from tangling in the gravel. Her dress is made of imported fabrics, velvet, brocade, and something that might actually be woven moonlight. Gold threads shimmer at every seam. She looks regal, serene, and mildly exhausted by the weight of her own sleeves. This is not Greta. This is Lady Isabel of House something impossible to pronounce, and she is marrying Sir Baldwin, 3rd son of a minor lord with impressive cheekbones and exactly 1 battlefield story he tells at every party. Noble weddings are a very different affair. The guest list has been curated with the precision of a military campaign. The feast involves multiple courses, each with a handwritten menu. There are banners, heralds, hired musicians who tune their instruments, and an alarming number of peacocks that appear to have been dyed to match the family crest. Historians agree that for the nobility, weddings weren't just personal, they were political. Marriages formed alliances, strengthened land claims, secured dowries, and occasionally ended blood feuds. Love was optional. Property was not. As you watch the proceedings, you spot a team of servants, each with a different task: holding the bride's train, fanning the groom, carrying a tray of symbolic objects including a loaf of gilded bread and what appears to be a live dove in a cage made of sugar. And the church? It is very present. This wedding is held inside a proper stone chapel with stained glass, a marble altar, and a bishop so tall he might have been carved. The Latin is flawless. The incense flows like theatrical fog. The couple kneels on silk cushions as choirs sing ethereal harmonies from a hidden balcony. You glance around and spot a few peasants peeking through the hedges, wide-eyed and whispering. This isn't just a ceremony, it's a performance. Quirky fact: in some noble weddings, a detailed marriage contract was signed in front of witnesses before the ceremony, outlining land rights, inheritance terms, and even contingency plans in case of death or lack of heirs. Love may or may not have been involved, but everyone knew who got the sheep and who owed what taxes. After the vows, a herald steps forward to announce the joining of the 2 houses in booming theatrical Latin. Then comes the showering of symbolic items: flower petals, silver coins, and, oddly, tiny gingerbread knights. You duck as one sails past your ear. The feast is next, and you somehow manage to slip in under the eccentric cousin category. The tables are covered in white cloth. The plates are pewter. The food is absurdly elaborate: swan pies with gilded crusts, sugar sculptures of saints, roasted quail resting on beds of almond paste. A man in a jeweled hat carves meat while quoting Ovid. There are toasts, long, florid, occasionally threatening. One uncle stands up and declares the bride the most obedient woman this side of the Rhine, to which Lady Isabel smiles politely and crushes a grape under her thumb. And then comes the entertainment. Dancers in silk, a magician who juggles flaming sticks, a troupe of minstrels singing a ballad about a knight who fell in love with a ghost, which ends with him marrying a tree. The nobles clap delicately. You lose track of how many wine refills you've been offered. Yet beneath all the sparkle and spectacle, you sense a different kind of pressure. Where Greta and Tomas had laughter and bread crusts, Lady Isabel and Sir Baldwin have performance and expectation. There's warmth, yes, but also calculation. You catch snippets of whispered negotiations, land transfers, dowry clauses, dowager opinions. Even the peacocks look tense. Historians still debate how much autonomy noble women had in these marriages. Some wielded power behind the scenes, managing estates and guiding alliances. Others were moved like chess pieces, their fates tied to family strategy and seasonal grain yields. As the feast winds down, the bride is gently escorted away by a retinue of attendants. Her husband follows with all the enthusiasm of someone heading to a treaty negotiation. The bedding ceremony here will be formal, witnessed, and possibly written about in someone's diary. You slip out quietly, back toward the warmth of the village. And as you walk beneath the stars, past the sheep pastures and crooked fences, you think of Greta and Tomas, laughing in their humble cottage, surrounded by turnips and candlelight. The noble wedding was impressive, grand, historical. But the peasant wedding? That felt like home. Morning comes again, soft and slow, with dew on the grass and smoke rising gently from cottage chimneys. Chickens cluck. A dog yaps. Once a child chases a goose that, by now, deserves retirement. The wedding is over. Well, mostly. You walk back through the village green. Tables are being cleared, benches stacked, and someone is peeling bits of sticky cake from the grass. It's peaceful, almost reverent, like the village is waking from a shared dream. Greta and Tomas are nowhere to be seen, which is, frankly, exactly how it should be. Their door is closed. A flower garland still hangs above it. A clay mug sits on the step, half full with yesterday's cider and a floating petal. The breeze rustles through the herb bundles overhead. Everything whispers, they made it. But of course, not every story ends with bread and bliss. In the quiet lull of the morning, you start to notice the other threads, those left dangling, unanswered, or knotted tight with time. Because while weddings were joyful, medieval marriage itself was complicated. You overhear two older women chatting near the oven. One sighs, saying her third husband was the only one who never tried to sell her chickens. The other nods and mutters, "Still better than mine. He once confused me for the neighbor and asked for stew." They both laugh. In the medieval world, marriage was legally binding, but not always lifelong. People died. Frequently. Quickly. The average marriage lasted 7 to 10 years, usually cut short by illness, childbirth, or farming accidents involving tools that should not be used barefoot. Widowhood was common, and often, remarriage followed swiftly, not just for companionship, but for survival. Women needed protection and property rights. Men needed someone who could manage the household and keep the goats from eating the curtains. Divorce, in the way we understand it, wasn't easily accessible, but annulments? Those happened. Historians still argue over how common annulments truly were, but church records show surprise. In cases, claims of spiritual impotence, accidental bigamy, or the ever-popular consanguinity, turns out marrying your third cousin was frowned upon once the priest finally connected the dots. One man, the blacksmith's brother, apparently claimed his marriage should be nullified because his wife bewitched his ale. The church disagreed. The wife, for her part, reportedly brewed even stronger ale afterward. There were also legal separations. In rare cases, couples were allowed to live apart, often under strict conditions, especially if abuse or abandonment could be proven. Records exist of women appealing to bishops for release from violent marriages, though results varied widely, often depending on local politics, wealth, and how loud you were willing to shout in Latin. But for every broken union, there were those that endured. You stroll past an elderly couple tending to their herb garden. He moves slowly, adjusting his cane. She weeds with sharp focus, muttering about slugs. They've been together for decades. "We married in mud," she says proudly as you pass, "and I'm still scraping it off his boots." In these small shared lives, marriage was less about passion and more about cooperation. A good match meant shared goals, compatible temperaments, and patience. So much patience. And humor. Always humor. Quirky tradition. In some villages, anniversaries weren't measured by calendar years, but by harvests. "We've been married through 12 bean pickings," someone might say. Or, "since the storm that drowned old Tom's boots." Love was measured in the mundane. How many mornings you built the fire first. How many times you patched their tunic. How many evenings you left the bigger spoon in their bowl. Greta and Tomas, curled under their patchwork quilt, may not yet know what storms lie ahead. But they've had their feast, their fire, their flowers. They've laughed, they've danced, and now they begin. The village, too, returns to its rhythm. Tools are gathered, animals fed, bread baked. The world, having paused briefly to celebrate, hums onward. As for you find a quiet spot beneath a crooked tree. The grass is cool, the air smells like rain might come. You sit back, watching the clouds shift and tumble. And as the wind stirs the branches overhead, you feel it, the soft, ancient truth of it all. That even in an age of mud, mystery, and mild soup poisoning, people found ways to love, to commit, to build tiny fortresses of joy against the chaos of the world. Not perfectly, not forever, but deeply enough to matter. And now, the village quiets. The fire's gone to embers, and the wedding songs echo only faintly in your memory. The scent of rosemary still lingers, faint but warm, like the ghost of a feast drifting through time. You lie back in the soft grass, imagining the world settling down around you. Greta and Tomas are asleep by now, wrapped in blankets and quiet breathing. The laughter of yesterday is folded into their walls, tucked beneath their pillows, hidden in the corners of their hearth. Somewhere, a night breeze stirs the herbs in the rafters. A sheep coughs. A chicken mutters in its sleep. The stars are out, gentle and dim, and the moon hums softly above, watching over rooftops and resting hearts. You feel your breath slow. The story slips away behind you, like a candle going out, like footsteps fading down a dirt path. The grass beneath you is cool, the air still. Your fingers loosen, your thoughts grow slow and sweet. This is the end of our story. But not the end of the village, or the love, or the laughter. Just a pause. A soft, safe closing of the curtain for the night. Let it fade. Let yourself drift. You're not in the medieval world anymore, but a little piece of it has come with you. A garland of rosemary in your hair, a taste of honey on your tongue, a memory of distant bells. Sleep well. Dream gently.